$757,000. Not a mansion, not a luxury sports car, not a winning lottery ticket. That staggering amount is tied to just three Roosevelt Dimes. It sounds impossible, and that's what makes this story so unbelievable. For decades, these tiny coins passed through hands, cash registers, and bank rolls while almost nobody realized what they were looking at. Then collectors uncovered a few hidden details, and everything changed. And the most shocking part? The final dime may be the one you would least expect. A small silver-colored dime sits in a jar, a cash register drawer, or the bottom of an old family coin collection. Most people would never give it a second glance. Yet there is one reason. Experienced collectors sometimes stop and take a much closer look. Not because the coin is made of gold, not because it is unusually large, not because it immediately looks rare. In fact, the most surprising thing about this coin is how completely ordinary it appears. And that is exactly where this story begins. The first chapter of our journey takes us to a Roosevelt dime dated 1967 with no mint mark. At first glance, it looks like millions of other dimes that circulated across America. The portrait of President Franklin D. Roosevelt appears familiar. The size feels familiar. The design seems completely normal. But hidden beneath that ordinary appearance is a story that many people never learn. To understand why collectors pay attention to this dime, we need to travel back to the late 1960s. America was changing rapidly. Television was bringing major events into living rooms across the country. New cars filled the highways. Music, culture, and technology were moving forward at incredible speed. Through all of it, coins passed from hand to hand every single day. People used them to buy lunch, gasoline, newspapers, and countless other necessities. The Roosevelt dime was one of the hardest-working coins in circulation. Most people spent them without thinking. Yet decades later, collectors began discovering that not every 1967 dime was viewed the same way. That realization created a mystery. If millions of these coins were made, why do some examples attract extraordinary attention, while others remain worth only face value? The answer begins with something that collectors notice almost immediately: condition. To the average person, two 1967 Roosevelt dimes may appear identical. Place them side by side and most people would struggle to tell them apart. But an experienced collector sees details invisible to casual observers. They look at Roosevelt's hair. They examine the torch on the reverse. They study the sharpness of the lettering. They inspect the surfaces under magnification. What appears to be a tiny difference can completely transform a coin's desirability. One dime may show years of circulation wear, softened details, and surface marks. Another may retain extraordinary sharpness, brilliant luster, and a strike quality that looks almost untouched by time. Suddenly, two coins that seemed identical become very different stories. And that is where the hunt begins. The 1967 Roosevelt dime was produced during an unusual period in American coinage history. To discourage collectors from hoarding newly minted coins, mint marks were temporarily removed from circulating coinage. As a result, the 1967 dime carries no mint mark regardless of where it was produced. For newer collectors, that detail can be confusing. Many people search the coin expecting to find a tiny letter. They look near the date. They inspect both sides. They assume something is missing. But on this coin, the absence of a mint mark is completely normal. Yet even though every 1967 dime shares that characteristic, collectors know there is much more to the story. The next clue involves strike quality. When coins are struck, immense pressure forces the design into a blank metal plancher. Ideally, every detail appears sharp and complete, but reality is rarely perfect. Some coins emerge with stronger strikes than others. On the Roosevelt dime, collectors often pay close attention to the bands on the torch, located on the reverse side. These tiny details may seem insignificant, but they reveal how sharply the coin was struck. A fully detailed strike can instantly separate one coin from countless others. And because so many coins entered circulation and accumulated wear, examples showing exceptional detail become increasingly difficult to locate. That challenge fuels collector demand, but the story becomes even more interesting. Over the years, certain mint errors and varieties have fascinated specialists. Tiny die imperfections, unusual strike characteristics, off-center strikes, doubled features, and other production anomalies can transform an otherwise ordinary dime into something people actively search for. Most errors are subtle. Some require magnification. Others are visible only when you know exactly where to look. This creates a situation that every collector loves, the possibility that something valuable has been overlooked. Imagine sorting through a box of old coins. Hundreds appear identical. Then one reveals an unusual characteristic that nobody noticed for decades. That possibility keeps collectors searching, and it explains why even common-looking dimes continue, attracting attention generation after generation. Another factor that dramatically influences value is preservation. Coins are survivors. Every scratch tells a story. Every mark represents a moment in circulation. The challenge is finding examples that escaped that journey. When a coin remains protected for decades, hidden away in a collection, bankroll, or forgotten storage box, it can preserve details that most examples lost long ago. Collectors often describe these coins as time capsules. Holding one can feel like stepping directly back into the year it was made. The original luster flashes across the surface. The design appears crisp. The coin looks remarkably close to the day it left the mint. And that is exactly the kind of quality that grading services examine carefully. Professional grading plays a major role in today's coin market. A tiny difference in grade can create a substantial difference in desirability. To casual observers, the distinction may seem almost impossible to see. To advanced collectors, it can mean everything. That brings us to the moment where curiosity starts turning into excitement. Because while most 1967 Roosevelt Dimes remain ordinary examples of American coinage, a truly exceptional specimen can enter an entirely different category. Not because it looks dramatically different, not because it announces its importance, but because specialists recognize qualities that most people never notice. The strike, the preservation, the eye appeal, the rarity of surviving examples in elite condition. When all of those factors come together, the results can be astonishing. In the world of elite coin collecting, a remarkable 1967 Roosevelt dime has been associated with values reaching approximately $357,000. That number surprises almost everyone. After all, we're talking about a dime, a coin originally worth only 10 cents. Yet collectors understand that they are not paying for 10 cents of spending power. They are paying for rarity, preservation, history, and the challenge of finding something truly exceptional. And as incredible as this first chapter has been, it introduces a question that becomes even more important in the next coin. Because some collectors believe another seemingly ordinary coin from a different year hides a clue that explains why certain modern era coins become far more desirable than anyone expects. Even stranger, the detail responsible for that mystery is often overlooked by beginners and experienced collectors alike. What is that hidden clue, and why does it cause collectors to stop the moment they see it? The answer begins with coin number 2. Most people assume valuable coins announce themselves. A dramatic error, a strange color, a missing design element. But sometimes the coins that create the biggest surprises are the ones that appear completely normal. That brings us to the second chapter of this investigation. The 1993 Roosevelt dime with a P mint mark. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. The date looks ordinary. The portrait looks familiar. The reverse design appears exactly as expected. Yet over time, collectors began treating certain 1993 P dimes very differently from the thousands of others that looked almost identical. The question is why? And the answer is hidden in a place most people never think to examine. When this dime entered circulation in 1993, America was entering a new era. Personal computers were becoming more common. The internet existed but had not yet become part of everyday life. Millions of Roosevelt dimes moved through banks, stores, restaurants, and vending machines without attracting attention. For years, most of them continued their journey unnoticed. But collectors were paying attention, not because the coin was old, not because it was made from a precious metal, and not because it was especially rare when it left the mint. The mystery developed later. Collectors usually focus on the date first, but specialists often look elsewhere. They begin studying the quality of the strike. That may sound simple, but it changes everything. Two 1993 P dimes can sit side by side and appear nearly identical to an untrained eye. Yet one may display noticeably stronger details than the other. The difference isn't always obvious. In fact, many people stop their examination here. They see a dime. Collectors see evidence. Evidence of how the coin was made. Evidence of how carefully it was struck. Evidence of how well it survived, and those clues tell a story. The Philadelphia Mint, represented by the P mint mark, produced enormous numbers of coins for circulation. Most fulfilled their purpose exactly as intended. They circulated, accumulated marks, and eventually blended into the background of everyday commerce. But a small number escaped that fate. Some retained unusually strong detail. Others preserved their original mint luster. A few survived with surfaces that looked remarkably untouched, despite the passing years. That's where the investigation becomes interesting. The real difference appears when attention shifts to the reverse design. Experienced Roosevelt dime collectors often spend extra time examining the torch, the olive branch, and the oak branch. Tiny details become important. Sharpness becomes important. Completeness becomes important. What appears insignificant to most people suddenly becomes critical. And the more closely collectors looked, the more they realized that exceptional examples were becoming surprisingly difficult to locate. Why? Because survival is often rarer than production. Millions may have been minted, but how many survived in truly extraordinary condition? That question has driven collector interest for years. The answer is smaller than many people expect. As decades passed, circulation removed countless examples from contention. Scratches accumulated. Contact marks appeared. Luster faded. Small imperfections became larger distractions. The average coin continued looking average. The best examples became increasingly special. This created an unusual situation in the marketplace. Collectors searching for top-quality specimens often found themselves competing for the same coins. Competition creates demand. Demand creates attention. And attention creates another question. How can collectors be sure a coin is genuinely exceptional? Authentication plays a major role. Professional grading services examine these coins carefully, evaluating preservation, strike quality, eye appeal, and surface condition. A tiny difference that casual observers overlook can separate an ordinary example from one that attracts serious collector interest. That's why experts frequently use magnification, not because the coin looks suspicious, because details matter. The smallest mark, the slightest weakness in the strike, the faintest disturbance in the surface, all of it contributes to the final assessment. And that assessment can dramatically change how collectors view the coin. Interestingly, many newcomers assume age alone determines value. This dime proves otherwise. A much older coin can sometimes sell for less than a newer coin with extraordinary quality. That's a concept many collectors remember the moment they encounter a coin like this. Because rarity isn't always about how many were made. Sometimes it's about how many survived at the highest levels. That realization explains why advanced collectors continue studying coins that many people would ignore. They're not searching for obvious treasures. They're searching for overlooked excellence. And when one of those exceptional examples appears, interest follows quickly. By this point, you might be wondering why collectors become so focused on a seemingly ordinary 1993 Roosevelt dime. The answer comes down to a combination of preservation, strike quality, collector demand, and the rarity of elite condition survivors. When those factors align perfectly, the market responds. And that's where the story takes its biggest turn. Because an extraordinary 1993 Roosevelt dime, recognized for its exceptional qualities, has reached values approaching $250,000. For a 10-cent coin, that's a number few people expect. Yet to serious collectors, the value reflects far more than the denomination. It reflects scarcity at the highest level, years of searching, and the challenge of finding a coin that stands above countless ordinary examples. But as surprising as this discovery may be, something even stranger emerged during this investigation. Collectors who consider this the most fascinating dime in the group often change their minds after examining the final coin. Because the next chapter isn't built around condition alone. Instead, it centers on a detail so unexpected that many people overlook it completely, even while holding the coin in their own hands. And once that detail is recognized, the entire story of this collection changes. By the time most collectors encounter a 1994 Roosevelt dime, they think they already know the ending. After all, it isn't a 19th century rarity. It isn't made of silver. It doesn't immediately stand out from the countless dimes that passed through American pockets during the 1990s, and that's exactly why this coin became such an interesting mystery. The final chapter of our documentary begins with a question that puzzled collectors. For years, how can a coin that looks so ordinary continue attracting attention from people who have examined thousands of Roosevelt dimes? At first, the answer seems simple. Then it becomes much more complicated. The year was 1994. America was experiencing a decade defined by rapid change. New technology was transforming daily life, while millions of coins quietly flowed through banks, stores, and cash registers across the country. Among them was the Roosevelt dime bearing a small P mint mark, identifying its origin at the Philadelphia Mint. Nothing unusual there, at least not at first glance. On the surface, this appears straightforward. The familiar portrait of Franklin Roosevelt faces left. The reverse displays the torch flanked by olive and oak branches, symbols representing liberty, peace, and strength. Most people stop their examination there. Collectors do not. They begin asking different questions. How sharp is the strike? How clean are the surfaces? Has the original mint luster survived? Are the smallest design details fully visible? Those questions reveal a second story hidden beneath the first. Most examples tell one story. Exceptional examples tell another. The average 1994 P dime spent years in circulation. It collected marks from other coins, lost portions of its original brilliance, and gradually became just another piece of pocket change. The finest survivors followed a very different path. Some escaped circulation almost entirely. Protected from everyday wear, they preserved details that countless others lost. Decades later, these elite examples became evidence of what the coin looked like when it first left the mint. Yet the closer collectors look, the more complicated the story becomes. Preservation alone isn't enough. Authentication matters. Professional grading services examine every aspect of a coin. Tiny imperfections that most people never notice can influence how a coin is viewed. A nearly invisible mark, a slight weakness in the strike, or a disturbance in the surface can separate an excellent coin from an extraordinary one. That distinction is where rarity begins to emerge. Not rarity of production, rarity of survival. And survival at the highest levels is often far more difficult than people expect. This realization drives collector demand. Serious collectors compete for the best examples because they know opportunities to acquire them are limited. As more collectors search for elite condition coins, exceptional pieces become increasingly desirable. Only after understanding that does the value begin to make sense. The attention isn't focused on an ordinary 1994 P dime. It is focused on the rare combination of preservation, strike quality, eye appeal, certification, and collector demand found in the very finest examples. When all of those factors align, the results can be remarkable. A top-tier 1994 P Roosevelt dime has been associated with values reaching approximately $150,000. For a coin worth only 10 cents in everyday commerce, the contrast is astonishing. And that brings us to the end of this investigation. Across all three Roosevelt dimes, the lesson remained surprisingly consistent. None of these coins announced their importance. None looked dramatically different to the average person. Their stories were hidden in details revealed only through patience, knowledge, and careful observation. The greatest discoveries in coin collecting rarely begin with something obvious. They begin with a second look, a closer inspection, and a willingness to notice what others ignore. Sometimes the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is measured not in dollars but in details. And as these Roosevelt dimes remind us, history often hides its most valuable secrets in the smallest places.